So glad you came to the studio today. I'm going to start with the paper we're using today. And I'm going to hold that up for you so you see we are using a D'Arches block. And this is what it looks like. It's a rough paper, rough. 140-pound watercolor block. The name is D'Arches. Now I recommend an 18 by 24. Okay, so with that in mind, this is a recommendation that you use 140 pounds. We can use other papers as long as it's a heavy enough weight. Okay? All right. I'm going to proceed and show you just exactly how to begin with values, because values are really the mainstay of my painting, and I want you to enjoy it. I'm going to show you also what brushes I use and how to use them. So we're going to cover a lot of territory today. On my drawing table here, I have a butcher tray. So let me show you that. This is my palette, and on the palette I put colors in the perimeter. The two colors I have are tube colors, and that's what we're going to work with today. One is Ultramarine Blue, and the other is Burnt Sienna. Now it comes in a tube, and I'm going to put that color right out on my palette. And this is Burnt Sienna. Next, I'm going to put out for you Ultramarine Blue. These are the two colors we're using. The reason for using these two colors is that they are complementary colors. The Burnt Sienna is very much like an orange. It's very close to an orange. I'd like to explain that every maker of paints mixes his paints in his own way, and therefore some colors might say blue, but the blue is a little bit off when you're mixing, and the same thing as reds, oranges, yellows, and therefore you have to find your own mix that's comfortable. And all of you, as you remember, I've always told you, be comfortable when you're painting and choose your own. Now I will recommend a palette, but you might want to add colors or delete them, and you will choose your own brush that you prefer, your own paper you prefer. That's what makes an individual. So that's what I want you to be aware of. Now today, to start with, I'm going to start with a value chart. And I think what I'll do is I'll choose one of these colors I've laid out, and I've filled my brush with absolutely loads of color. This is the Burnt Sienna, which is, I say, is much like an orange. Now I'm going to place that in a block with this chisel brush, and I'm going to place it just so on this paper so that you see. Okay, now we have solid color. We have a solid block of color. That's intense. Now if I go back to my palette and dip my brush in water without getting more paint, I should be able to get a lesser value. Now let's follow that on camera. All right, I shall again go back to my palette, put more water on the brush, and get a lesser value. Go back to the palette again. No more paint, just more water. And we're getting less and less color as we go. I'm going to show you how this knowledge is important to us in a minute, in a wash. To control the amount of water also, you will use your butcher pan edge to take water out of the brush. Okay, we're going to get a little bit more water here on our palette. We're going to have a lot of water on our palette when we're done. Okay, here we go. Again, take some of the water out of my brush. Now, do you see how the scale is going down? It's sort of like piano scales, isn't it? Again, more water, but no more paint, and we go down. So we've started with the intense and gone all the way down with less and less water. Now, this is the reason this is important to us. When you are doing any sort of a painting, contrast and values is the most important part of your painting. And therefore, I want you to be aware of this. Now, at the beginning of the show, we showed you a picture of a house. The house would not be able to be shown without the value differences in the white on the slab of the wood and the blue shadows and so forth. That is what makes a white house, because you see we're using white paper here as our white. We're not going any whiter than the paper. We do not use white paint. So therefore we really need this. Okay, so I'm going to do a quick wash for you and show you just what this burnt sienna does for us. And I'm going to put some complementary color, which is the ultramarine blue, into our wash, and we'll have a two-tone painting. And what we should have when we're done is a very successful painting with only two colors. And it's because we're using the complements, so let's try it. First, we wet the area of the paper where we're going to put our sky. Again, I'm going to tell you, wet it. Don't leave any holidays, they call them, little holes of dry paper, because your color will dry brush right away. And I'll talk to you later about dry brush. Right now we're working wet on wet. Okay, now I shall take some of the water out of my brush and go to my palette. I have all these different values to choose from, don't I? I will start with the corner of the sky where I started wetting. Go back, get more intense color, and add a little bit of the ultramarine blue to that. What that does is it darkens that, excuse me, it darkens that burnt sienna. And now I carry it down, you see? Carry it down across so that we have a nice airy wash with just very few strokes. Never overdo your washes. Now if I go back in, dip my brush back in sienna with a little bit of blue on it, I'll have a dull sienna. And so now I have a suggestion of maybe a sunset with just two colors. I'll go back into the sienna and put just a little touch up here of that blue, that colored sky of the sunset. And if I go into the blue, look at that, see what we're doing? We're stroking back into it, but not too much. Now I'm just going to leave that alone. Now with the same two colors, I can go back in, and where this is dry, I can work. Now if I work into the area that's wet, I'll have what we call bleeding. And I'm not going to get into the bleeding yet. I'm going to work on the dry. So with the dry paper and a wet brush, this is what we call dry brush, using the paint on the brush sideways at an angle. What you do is you get those little holes in the paper to come through and cause a little spackle. And it's wonderful spontaneous color. Now, as you noticed, I haven't even used this blue in full strength. Instead, I have mixed it with sienna and gotten different values. Now, what happens if I use it full strength? Well, it's just going to shout at you. Look at that. So now we have a silhouette of some weeds or something in the foreground, and we'll frame our little painting with that. Okay, I can go back in and get even more intense. And so we have a dark corner with two colors. We formed a value scale. The same thing you have here, from the very darkest to the very lightest in one painting. You see? All right, now there are other things you can do at this point. If it's too wet for you to work, you can go in with a cloth, towel, or sponge. And you can blot your painting, and you can get things to happen. You can eliminate color, or you can simply dry your painting so that you can work on it further. You see, I just pulled that color right out of there, so if I wanted it, if I don't like that, I can go back in and put a little color in, but don't put too much at this point, because if you do, you're going to scrub into your paper and spoil the spontaneous effect, which watercolor is. It's spontaneous. It's wonderful and fresh, and you want to keep that spontaneity. If you overdo it, you're going to get an overworked horse, and it's going to be boring. Okay? So this is very often a problem. Especially with the beginner, you start to work on it and you can overdo it. So try not to, okay? I want to help you along as best as I can, and at this point what I think I'll do is show you a technique or two. As long as we have this nice dark here, let me show you by scratching with the end of a brush how I can make these weeds here become individual. Now they will dry with a hard line. They will show in just a little while. You'll be able to see them. Right now you can barely see them. So don't forget about them. We're going to come back to them later. So that's all I'm going to do with those, and I'm just going to leave them alone and let them happen. Now what has happened is I've grooved the paper with the edge of my brush, and by doing that, the color which I put here, the darks, have gone into those little grooves, and they'll always be there. They'll be retained. Now, what I'd like to remind you of is the same thing might happen is if you were erasing, that is abrasive on that paper, and the abrasion will pick up the color and ruin your paper. So let's not erase, okay, on that wonderful watercolor paper. All right, now, we still have a wet here. If we work into that, it will be wet. What happens if we work into that? All right, let me show you. If I should want something to disappear into the background, this would be just the time to do it. So let's see this mountain disappear. Now watch it. Okay, I've added a little bit of the blue to the sienna. And now here it's dry. So here it will show up more. And I'm bringing it right to a horizon because I want to put water there. And I want it to be a long, firm line. Now what happens is that that color goes right into the sky and bleeds because it's still wet. Here it's dry and it stopped. Here it's bleeding and it continues. It will continue until it's dry. So if you don't want the effect, wait for it to dry. If you do, this is a way to do it. Now what I'm doing is straightening that line at the horizon because the water isn't going up or downhill, is it, unless it's a waterfall. So what I've created is an illusion of space. What I have here is a closer hill or mountain, if you will, and here is one retreating into the back, and will continue to retreat until it's dry because it's forever bleeding and it's constantly losing its value tone. So that's what we have, and here we have white, white water. Okay, what do we have in our water? Very probably a reflection. This is sunset, and we have this blue reflected, and because this is so far away, we probably wouldn't reflect that. And because we wouldn't reflect it, we're not going to. We're going to leave instead that sparkle of water and perhaps some of the sky. So as you get further away, there's less chance of it reflecting. Now let me show you again the dry brush and what we have. I'm taking my chisel brush to the palette. I'm mixing blue with it because I want to repeat the blue in this mountain and drag it down. But there's also a little sienna in it. It isn't a real firm blue. Now I'm going to leave a little bit of a line of white because sometimes the light hits that line. Have you ever looked out in the water and seen it do that? It will just leave a sparkling line. Not always, but in this case, we're just going to pretend that's what it does. And we're going to leave a little line of white crisp light. And then I'm going to pull it down, pull it down, pull it down. Bringing it closer and closer because that mountain is forming a shape going that way. And I think I'll just bring it over a little bit there. All right. Now I'm going to clean my brush out. By that I mean not only do I wet it to get all of the paint out, but I squeeze it so it's absolutely dry. Now I can control it better. So remember, we're talking about control today. Control is what we're all about. We're talking about control of water. Remember, our papers are white. Our color is mixed with water to get the effect we want, and that is our medium, water. So that's so important for you to remember. Don't forget, in oils you have chirp and oil as a medium. Here you have water and paper. That's it. So don't abuse it. By that I mean, if you overwork your paper, you lose that wonderful feeling of watercolor. Now I'm going to dry brush for you right across to pick up some of the color of the sky, but I intend to leave this glistening white. So let's try that, starting at the edge and pulling it over, starting at the edge and pulling it over, and again. So I have a little bit of that color in the sky. I'm going to repeat that procedure over here. So here we have reflection here and a little blue in the sky, and because it's in there we have to reflect that also. So let's do that again, being very careful to have the right amount of water on my brush. And now this, I can't repeat it too many times. Practice this until you feel confident. Otherwise, you're going to feel like it's a big chore. A little blue to streak over there, you see? Repeating what you see in the sky. All right, so what we have is wonderful world of value. Light, middle tone, here's another middle tone, and a dark, and white itself. So you have all these values in one, just as you have in the value chart. And I can't emphasize it enough. All right, now I'm going to go in, and I'm going to work with a small Sumi brush. The reason I'm going to use this is because I want to do some detailing. All right. Now, let me show you over on the palette here that if I take my brush and put it to the edge of the palette and keep turning it, I can retain the point. And when there's enough water out of the brush, I'm ready to use it. So, all right, now the brush is the way I want it. I'll go in and work with it and then go back. Might take a little longer, but at least I know that I have the control of the medium when I do that. Okay, let's go in here with our little brush. And as you see, it's a darker value than that light. You also notice it will bleed a little bit where it's still wet. All right, let's do it again. This Sumi brush is wonderful because it retains color for quite a while, and I'm quite comfortable with it, but it took a while to get used to, so I expect it to take you a while also. It's well worth the effort, though. Again, we put in the underbrush. Now let me show you the stroke. Place the brush, pull the brush, and begin to lift it where you want to stop. Let me show you again. Place, pull, and lift. Let's try twisting that. Watch this. All right? Now we carry it down. You see? Try again. Carry it down. And carry it down. And so you have with this brush so much paint that I've been continuing with these strokes without going back for more paint, and that is one of the reasons I like it. Also the detailing. You can get this brush at Creative World or other art stores, and it is inexpensive but well worth the effort to get used to it. It's called a Sumi brush, and the Sumi brush is a brush being used by calligraphers even now in China and Japan. It's been used for thousands of years in the Orient, and it is animal hair and a bamboo handle. Look for it in your store. Be sure that it's a good brush and that there are no broken bristles. It must form a point and must retain the water. If it doesn't form a point, it is not of any value to you. They are inexpensive, so therefore it's well worth your getting more than one and experimenting with it. I'm using the two because one is large and holds a big wash, and the other one is small for detailing. Okay. As you notice here above my palette, I am using a type of screening. It's really probably a placemat, and I place my brushes on it to air, and that is very important because they do not mold that way, and brushes will mildew and mold. So you want to take care of your brushes. Whether they're expensive or not, they should retain a long life. Okay, so with that, I'm going to also mention that if you are working on your paper and want to erase, the kneaded eraser is the best thing. It will not cause your paper to tear. So this is the kneaded eraser. It comes in a square and it's soft. Let me show you. See it pull? Okay, it's rubber and it's flexible, and you can turn it that way and use the inside without any soil. So it you keep changing it and using it, and it's very, very helpful. Now I also like to use a very soft pencil when I work. It's any B pencil will work, but I prefer ebony. I don't want you to dig into your paper with a pencil. You can draw lightly, but do not dig into the paper. Artists often pencil after a painting to give emphasis. They will not necessarily erase the pencil. I don't myself usually erase it unless it's covering a valuable white space. I indicate very lightly what I want to do. Now when I do a little sketch like this where I'm not drawing first, that's fine for a sketch. But with a detailed painting, I like to do several sketches first in pencil, and then I follow through and do my painting. And the painting might be a small sketch to see what my color scale is going to be, and then I go to a large painting. And this takes quite a lot of time. Somebody was asking me recently at an art show how long it takes, and I can only tell you it takes a lot of time. I'd like you to come to a one-man show of mine at Lakeside, and I'd love to meet you. It will be November 3rd, 4th, and 5th. And it's at the Deck the Walls Gallery. So please come. I'd love to meet my friends. I've met many of you this summer, and it's been wonderful, and we'd love to meet more of you. I want you to paint, and I want you to enjoy yourself. Okay, now going back to this, we could finish up our painting with many different ideas. We could do so many things with this painting. This is just the preface for a painting, and maybe we'd want to go in and put other large trees, or we might want to put fences. You see, you can do anything with a painting from this standpoint, because this is just a beginning and just an idea for you. But I want you to practice with it so that you get some ideas, and then go from there and use your imagination. Be free and enjoy and just have a wonderful time. And I hope that I'm going to see all of you next week right here, and we'll go over some more things that we'd like you to learn. It's been so good to have you here. Bye-bye for now.